The cold, metallic hull of the human starship touched the alien planet's surface with a soft thud. It was the first time humans had set foot on this world, and Captain Jason Turner felt the weight of that moment. For years, Earth had been part of the galaxy's treaty, a set of rules designed to prevent conflict between the alien species. But one of the most difficult terms had been the prohibition on advanced weapons. The humans were allowed only old-fashioned medieval arms, crossbows, longbows, and trebuchets. Jason turned his gaze to the horizon. The alien city stretched before him, its towering spires glowing faintly against the purple sky. Despite the peace, the humans were still considered by many to be a weak species. Their technology had been limited, their weapons outdated. But Jason and his team were here to show the galaxy that humans could still be a force to be reckoned with. "Ready, sir?" Lieutenant Sarah Whitaker asked as she stepped up beside him. Her expression was calm, but Jason could tell she was just as nervous as he was. This was a high-stakes meeting, one that would determine Earth's future role in the galaxy. Jason nodded, adjusting the strap on his shoulder. He wasn't wearing any advanced armor or carrying futuristic energy weapons. Instead, a wooden longbow was slung across his back, and a quiver full of arrows rested at his side. Beside him, Sarah carried a crossbow, and their other team members carried trebuchets and other medieval-style weapons. "We've trained for this," Jason said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He knew that their presence here would be laughed at. The alien rulers were expecting to see humans with weapons that belonged in history books, weapons they had no use for. But Jason was determined to prove them wrong. They stepped off the ship, and the soft crunch of their boots on the alien soil echoed in the quiet. The alien delegation was already waiting for them. There were no handshakes or pleasantries. The Varnak, the alien species they were meeting with, didn't engage in human customs. Instead, they simply regarded the humans with curious, almost dismissive eyes. The leader of the Varnak, an imposing figure named Zorath, stepped forward. His dark skin shimmered under the planet's twin suns, and his 6 eyes narrowed as he glanced at the humans' weapons. "So, this is what Earth brings to the table?" Zorath's voice was a low, rumbling growl. He motioned toward the weapons, his 6 eyes scanning the longbows and crossbows with an air of disbelief. "Primitive. I am sure we will find this entertaining." Jason didn't flinch. He had expected this reaction. The Varnak Empire controlled half the galaxy, and their weapons were far more advanced than anything humanity could produce. But what they didn't understand was that humans didn't need fancy weapons to win. "We're here to prove that strength is not only about the weapon you carry," Jason said, his voice steady. "It's about the people who wield it." Zorath chuckled, a sound that was both deep and unsettling. "Very well, human. Let's see what you are made of." The Varnak leaders had prepared a demonstration. They wanted to show the humans how easily they could crush any threat from Earth. They had set up a small arena outside the meeting hall, surrounded by towering metal walls. On the other side of the arena, a series of advanced drones hovered, their sleek, shiny bodies reflecting the harsh light of the twin suns. "These are our combat drones," Zorath announced, gesturing toward the machines. "They are equipped with plasma cannons and energy shields. We will test your weapons against them." Jason nodded, giving Sarah a quick glance. She raised an eyebrow, but he could tell she wasn't worried. The drones may have had the latest technology, but they were still machines. Humans were resourceful, and Jason knew that they could make their simple weapons work, even against something as advanced as these drones. "We're ready," Jason said. The Varnak gave a nod, and the drones began to move. They started slow, testing their speed and agility, but soon they picked up pace. The drones hummed through the air, their plasma cannons charging, ready to fire. Without warning, one of the drones fired a bolt of blue energy at the humans, aimed directly at Jason's group. The blast hit the ground just in front of them, sending up a cloud of dust, but Jason didn't flinch. "Take your positions," he ordered. Sarah quickly set up her crossbow, positioning herself behind a large rock for cover. Caleb Davis, a quiet but highly skilled soldier, stepped forward with his longbow. He pulled an arrow from his quiver and nocked it, his eyes focused. "On my mark," Jason said. The drones charged, their plasma cannons charging for another shot. Jason could see the gleam in their metal bodies, the hum of their energy shields ready to deflect any attack, but humans didn't fight in the same way. They didn't need energy shields or plasma cannons. They used their brains, their training, and their skills. "Fire!" Jason shouted. Caleb's arrow shot out like lightning. It flew through the air, striking one of the drones directly in its weak spot, the spot where the energy shield didn't cover. The drone exploded in a burst of sparks and fire. The Varnak spectators gasped, and Jason couldn't help but feel a spark of pride. "Again!" Jason ordered. Sarah, with her crossbow, fired next. The bolt struck another drone in its central core. It twisted in mid-air, spinning uncontrollably before crashing to the ground. The rest of the Varnak delegation stood frozen, eyes wide with shock. They had expected this fight to be easy. They had thought the humans were nothing more than children with toys. But now, it was clear that Earth had more to offer than they had realized. Jason turned to the rest of his team. "Keep it up. Stay focused." The remaining drones swarmed in a tight formation, firing their plasma bolts rapidly, but the humans were ready. Caleb fired another arrow, hitting another drone in its power core. Sarah reloaded her crossbow with incredible speed, her movements fluid and practiced. They worked together, their tactics more than just simple shots. They were thinking ahead, anticipating the drones' moves before they happened. One last drone remained. It hovered above them, scanning the humans below. But it was too late. With a final well-aimed shot from Caleb, the last drone fell to the ground, its mechanical body twitching before it powered down. The arena fell silent. The Varnak, who had been so sure of their superiority, now stood stunned. Jason wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart racing. It had been a calculated risk, but they had pulled it off. The humans had proven their worth, not through advanced technology, but through their ingenuity and skill. Zorath, the Varnak leader, stepped forward once again. His 6 eyes were wide with surprise, and for the first time, there was no trace of laughter in his voice. You have done what I thought impossible," he said, his voice low and almost respectful. "Perhaps Earth is not as weak as we believed." Jason gave a small smile, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Varnak had seen what humans were capable of, but the real challenge was yet to come. "We'll see," Jason said quietly. "But the treaty isn't over yet." The atmosphere on the alien world was tense. After the humans' impressive display with their medieval weapons, the Varnak leaders had to rethink their strategy. Captain Jason Turner and his team stood on the edge of the great alien city, where their next test awaited. Jason could still feel the heat from the battle earlier. His arms ached from the longbow, and his mind raced with thoughts of what would happen next. The Varnak had underestimated Earth, but that mistake had already cost them several drones. The question now was whether the aliens would continue to test the humans or offer them respect. Lieutenant Sarah Whitaker stood beside him, her eyes scanning the alien structures. "What do you think their next move will be?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. Jason looked at her, then at the Varnak military officers who were gathered just ahead. They were not so much concerned about their weapons anymore as they were about their pride. After the loss of several drones, the Varnak needed to save face. Jason knew that something bigger was coming, something more dangerous. "I don't think they'll let it go," Jason replied. "They need to prove that their technology is superior." I wouldn't be surprised if they try something else, something bigger. Sarah nodded, agreeing with him. The humans had only been testing their weapons against drones, but the Varnak were not going to stop at mere machines. They wanted to see how the humans would handle real combat, and they had already made it clear that the stakes would get higher. It wasn't long before they got their answer. Zorath, the Varnak leader, stepped forward with a dark look on his face. His 6 eyes focused intently on Jason, as if trying to peer into his very soul. "We are not impressed by your simple weapons, human," Zorath said, his voice deep and commanding. "We will show you the strength of the Varnak." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. The time for games had passed. The Varnak weren't just testing humanity anymore. They were preparing to strike. The humans had no choice but to fight back. The Varnak soldiers began to move into position, and the ground shook as massive machines appeared from behind the city walls. These were not the small drones they had fought before. These were towering war machines, heavily armored and bristling with weapons. The humans were outmatched in terms of technology, but that didn't mean they were out of the fight. "We need to hold them off, or we'll never make it back to Earth," Jason said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "Everyone, take your positions." Caleb Davis, the sharpshooter, was already moving into place. His longbow was drawn and ready, his eyes focused on the advancing war machines. Sarah quickly set up her crossbow, and the other soldiers followed suit, each of them positioning themselves behind the large rocks and boulders scattered around the battlefield. They had learned from their earlier encounters. The Varnak had underestimated them once, but they wouldn't make that mistake again. The war machines loomed closer, their massive legs crushing the ground beneath them. Each one had a powerful energy cannon mounted on its back, capable of leveling entire cities. But the humans had no intention of standing still and waiting for their destruction. They would make the Varnak pay for every inch they advanced. "Ready?" Jason asked, looking at his team. They nodded in response. "Fire!" Caleb released his arrow first. The longbow's string twanged, sending the projectile flying through the air. It struck the side of one of the war machines, hitting a weak spot in its armor. Sparks flew as the machine staggered, its systems malfunctioning. Sarah followed up with a shot from her crossbow. The bolt flew true, hitting another machine's fuel chamber. The explosion sent a shockwave through the battlefield, shaking the ground beneath their feet. "Nice shot, Sarah," Jason said with a grin. But the Varnak were not easily defeated. They quickly recovered, their machines continuing to advance despite the damage. The aliens fired their energy cannons, sending beams of deadly light across the battlefield. The humans dodged and took cover behind rocks, but the energy blasts were getting closer. Jason knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The Varnak would eventually wear them down with their superior firepower, but the humans weren't about to give up. They had something the Varnak didn't: creativity and determination. "Caleb, cover me!" Jason shouted. Caleb gave a quick nod, pulling another arrow from his quiver and firing at a machine's weak spot. His arrows were fast and accurate, hitting the machines in their vulnerable spots. But Jason was already moving forward, making his way toward the Trebuchet positioned on a nearby hill. The Trebuchet was their biggest weapon, but it required a team effort to launch. Sarah quickly joined him, taking the ropes and working with him to load the large stones into the sling. The war machines were closing in fast, but they still had a chance. "Ready?" Jason asked, sweat dripping down his face. Sarah gave him a determined look. "Let's do this!" With a loud creak, the trebuchet was pulled back, the stone in the sling ready to be launched. Jason gave the command, and with all his strength, he released the rope. The stone flew through the air, soaring toward the nearest war machine. It struck the machine with a deafening crash. The machine's energy shield flickered and crackled before collapsing under the impact. The machine itself crumpled, its legs buckling as it fell to the ground with a massive explosion. "Direct hit!" Sarah shouted, her voice filled with excitement. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining machines were still coming, and they were angrier than ever. They fired their energy cannons again, and this time the blasts came faster, more concentrated. The humans scattered, trying to stay ahead of the deadly beams. Jason could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he dodged another blast. "Caleb, aim for the legs!" Jason yelled. The sharpshooter didn't hesitate. He knocked another arrow, aimed carefully, and released. The arrow hit the leg of one of the machines, piercing through the armor and damaging its hydraulic systems. The machine stumbled, its leg twisted at an unnatural angle. "Nice work, Caleb!" Jason called out. The humans were making progress, but the Varnak were relentless. The remaining war machines kept coming, their cannons firing at will. Jason knew they couldn't keep up the fight for much longer. Just as Jason was about to order a retreat, he spotted something in the distance. Another group of Varnak soldiers had arrived, bringing reinforcements. The battle was about to get even harder. "We need to fall back!" Jason shouted. "Get to the ship, now!" The humans fought their way back toward the ship, using their weapons to keep the Varnak at bay. Caleb, Sarah, and the others covered each other as they moved, dodging energy blasts and firing back with their medieval weapons. Finally, they reached the ship, and Jason signaled for the doors to open. The humans scrambled inside, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. As the doors closed behind them, Jason looked out at the alien battlefield. They had held their own against an enemy far more powerful than they were. But the war was far from over. The Varnak had seen what humans were capable of, and they wouldn't stop until they had crushed the threat. "Get ready for the next wave," Jason muttered to himself. "This is just the beginning." The ship's engines hummed as it lifted off the ground, leaving behind the wreckage of the battlefield and the stunned Varnak soldiers. Captain Jason Turner stared out the window as the alien world shrank beneath them, the towering structures of the city growing smaller until they were just a distant memory. His body was sore from the battle, but his mind was racing. They had survived the first test, but the Varnak were not finished with them yet. Jason took a deep breath and turned to his team. Sarah Whitaker was sitting quietly, her eyes closed as she ran her fingers along the surface of her crossbow. Caleb Davis, the sharpshooter, was polishing his longbow, his expression focused but calm. Each of them was deep in thought, preparing for the next fight. Jason knew that this war wasn't going to be like anything they had ever faced before. The Varnak were a powerful, technologically advanced species. But humanity had one thing the Varnak did not: adaptability. "Everyone all right?" Jason asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. Caleb looked up and gave a slight nod. "I'm good, sir. Just thinking about the next move." Sarah opened her eyes and smiled. "We made it through that first wave. We'll make it through the next one, too." Jason nodded. "We need to be ready. The Varnak won't give up. But we've shown them what humans are capable of. We can't back down now." The mood was grim, but there was a quiet confidence in the air. The humans knew they had something the Varnak could not ignore. While the aliens relied on their advanced technology, the humans had something deeper: ingenuity, strategy, and sheer determination. Hours later, the ship touched down on a different part of the planet. The Varnak had moved their forces to a new location, and the humans had followed. Jason and his team disembarked quickly, weapons in hand, ready for the next round. This time, the humans were not walking into a prepared arena. Instead, they found themselves in a dense, jungle-like area with thick trees and vines hanging from every direction. The air was heavy with moisture, and the sound of alien creatures echoed through the forest. "Stay sharp," Jason warned as he scanned the surroundings. "The Varnak have the advantage here. They know this land. But we have the element of surprise." Sarah adjusted the crossbow at her side, her eyes narrowing as she listened to the strange sounds around them. "What are we up against?" "I don't know," Jason replied, "but we'll find out soon enough." As they moved forward, the sound of something large moving in the distance caught their attention. Jason raised his hand, signaling the team to stop. They crouched low behind the nearest cover, peering through the thick underbrush. Out of the shadows, a massive Varnak war machine emerged. This one was different from the others. It was larger, more heavily armored, and had 4 powerful legs designed to navigate through rough terrain like the jungle. The machine's weapons were hidden beneath a protective casing, but it was clear that it was built for one purpose: destruction. "We need to take that thing down," Caleb said, his voice low. "Caleb, do you think you can hit it?" Jason asked, his eyes focused on the machine. Caleb thought for a moment. "It's going to be tough, but I can try. We'll need to find its weak points." Jason nodded. He knew that their longbows and crossbows were powerful, but they wouldn't be enough to stop a machine like that head-on. They would need to be smart. They would need to outthink the Varnak. "We'll take a different approach," Jason said. "We'll use the jungle to our advantage. We'll stay hidden until we get close enough to strike. Caleb, Sarah, stay behind me. We'll attack when the time is right." The team moved quietly, using the thick vegetation to conceal their movements. Jason led them through the trees, his heart beating fast. Every sense was on high alert. He could hear the hum of the war machine's energy systems as it moved through the jungle, searching for targets. They moved closer until the war machine was just ahead. The Varnak soldiers inside it were unaware of the human's presence. Jason raised his hand, signaling for the team to stop. "Caleb, now's your shot," Jason whispered. Caleb took a deep breath and raised his longbow. He aimed carefully, scanning the war machine's legs for any weak spots. Then he released the arrow. It flew through the air and struck the side of one of the machine's legs. The arrow pierced through the armor, but the machine didn't stop. "Missed the sweet spot," Caleb muttered. "But I did some damage." Jason didn't hesitate. "Sarah, get your crossbow ready." Sarah quickly loaded a bolt into the crossbow and aimed at the same leg. She fired, the bolt striking the same spot Caleb had hit. This time, the machine staggered, its leg faltering. It was enough to slow it down. But the war machine wasn't defeated yet. It fired back, sending a beam of energy straight toward the human's position. The beam missed by inches, hitting a tree just behind them and splitting it in two. The explosion sent debris flying through the air. "We've got to move!" Jason shouted. "Get to higher ground!" The team broke into action, moving quickly through the jungle. The war machine pursued them, but its heavy armor made it slow, and the jungle's thick trees gave the humans cover. Jason led the team up a steep hill, where they found a better vantage point. From here, they could see the entire battlefield. The war machine was still moving, trying to catch up, but it was struggling in the dense foliage. "This is it," Jason said. "We need to finish it now." Caleb aimed again, his focus sharper than ever. "If I hit the leg again, I think I can take it down." "Do it," Jason ordered. Caleb fired. The arrow struck true, hitting the weakened leg. This time, the war machine collapsed, its massive frame crumpling to the ground with a deafening crash. The sound echoed through the jungle as the Varnak soldiers inside scrambled to escape. "We did it," Sarah said, a breath of relief escaping her. But Jason wasn't ready to relax. The Varnak soldiers were still a threat, and more machines were on the way. They needed to move fast before the Varnak regrouped. "Regroup at the ship," Jason ordered. "We're not out of danger yet." The humans sprinted back to the ship, weaving through the trees and over the uneven ground. They could hear the sound of more Varnak war machines approaching, but they had a head start. They reached the ship just in time, and the doors closed behind them as the engines roared to life. Jason stood at the control panel, his hands gripping the controls. The ship lifted off, leaving the jungle behind. As they ascended into the sky, Jason couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They had won another battle against impossible odds. The Varnak had been overconfident, assuming that their machines and technology would easily crush the humans. But time and time again, humanity had proven them wrong. The battle wasn't over, but as Jason looked at his team, he knew they were ready for whatever came next. "We're just getting started," Jason said quietly to himself. The sky over the alien planet darkened as the human ship soared through the clouds. Jason Turner stood at the ship's helm, his face grim as the harsh winds of the planet's atmosphere whipped past the windows. The team had barely caught their breath from the battle in the jungle, but they knew it wasn't over. The Varnak were relentless, and this time, they were ready for the humans. "Where are we headed next, sir?" Sarah Whitaker asked, stepping up beside Jason. Her voice was calm, but the tension in her posture was clear. The fight was far from finished. "We're heading to Zalnar's fortress," Jason replied, his eyes locked on the vast landscape below. "The Varnak leader is there, and he's not happy about what happened in the jungle. He'll have his defenses up, but we need to hit them before they can regroup." Caleb Davis, who had been sitting quietly, looked up from the longbow he had been cleaning. "You think we'll be able to breach the fortress, sir?" Jason met Caleb's gaze. The sharpshooter's expression was as serious as ever. "We don't have much choice, Caleb. If we don't stop them now, they'll bring the fight to Earth. We're the first line of defense. We can't let the Varnak win." The ship rumbled as it descended toward the fortress, the massive stone walls coming into view. Zalnar's fortress was an ancient structure built into the side of a mountain, with towering walls that seemed to touch the sky. The Varnak had fortified it with their most advanced weaponry, making it nearly impossible to break through. But the humans had done the impossible before. As the ship touched down outside the fortress, Jason gathered his team. "We're going in fast and hard. We don't have time to waste. Once we're inside, we'll need to disable the Varnak defenses and get to Zalnar. We need to take him down before he can call for reinforcements." The team nodded, ready for the challenge. They grabbed their weapons, crossbows, longbows, and trebuchets, and set out toward the fortress. The gates were massive, reinforced with thick metal bars and energy shields. But the humans had learned to be resourceful. They would find a way in. Jason led the charge, his eyes scanning the fortress for any weaknesses. "Caleb, take the high ground. Sarah, stick with me. We need to get to the gates quickly." The team moved with precision, each member knowing their role. Caleb scaled a nearby cliff, his bow in hand, ready to provide cover. Sarah stayed close to Jason, her crossbow ready to fire at any Varnak soldiers who came into view. As they approached the fortress, the gates began to open. The Varnak soldiers were waiting for them, weapons drawn, but the humans were faster. Jason raised his longbow, and with one smooth motion he fired an arrow into the chest of the nearest soldier. The Varnak fell with a grunt, and the rest of the soldiers hesitated for a moment, shocked by the sudden attack. "Now!" Jason shouted. The humans charged forward, firing their weapons as they ran. Caleb's arrows found their marks with deadly accuracy, each one taking down a Varnak soldier before they had a chance to react. Sarah's crossbow bolts struck down another, and the humans pushed forward with determination. The Varnak quickly regrouped. But the humans were relentless. They moved through the fortress using their knowledge of medieval tactics to outmaneuver the Varnak's advanced weaponry. Jason led them through narrow hallways and up to the top of a high tower where they could see the full extent of the battle. Down below, the Varnak's energy cannons began to fire, sending blasts of energy toward the humans. The beams of light tore through the air, but the humans were quick on their feet. They used the cover of the tower to stay out of the Varnak's line of sight, then returned fire with their crossbows and longbows. Caleb fired from his elevated position, taking down one of the Varnak soldiers who had been manning an energy cannon. Sarah fired next, her bolt finding the weak spot in another cannon's armor. The Varnak soldiers began to retreat, their confidence shaken by the humans' ability to fight back. "We've got them on the run," Sarah said, a grin forming on her face. Jason didn't smile. "Don't get too comfortable. Zalnar's still out there. We need to take him down before he can escape." The team continued their assault, pushing deeper into the fortress. The Varnak were starting to lose ground, their advanced technology unable to match the humans' tactics and determination. But as they neared the central chamber, they encountered the toughest resistance yet. Zalnar had been waiting for them. The Varnak leader stood in the center of the chamber, surrounded by a group of heavily armored soldiers. His 6 eyes glowed with a cold fury, and in his hand he held a massive energy blade, crackling with energy. "You think you can defeat me, humans?" Zalnar's voice boomed, echoing through the chamber. "I am the leader of the Varnak Empire. You are nothing but insects to me." Jason stepped forward, his longbow raised. "We're not insects, Zalnar. We're humans. And we've fought for everything we have. This ends now." The battle began in an instant. Zalnar charged forward, his energy blade flashing through the air as he swung it toward Jason. The humans scattered, dodging the blade's deadly arc. Caleb fired an arrow, but Zalnar deflected it with a swipe of his weapon. Sarah quickly reloaded her crossbow, taking another shot at the Varnak leader, but Zalnar was too fast, parrying the bolt with ease. Jason knew they couldn't rely on their bows and crossbows alone. He had to get in close. With a battle cry, he charged at Zalnar, ducking under the energy blade's swing. He closed the gap between them, his hand gripping the hilt of a sword he had taken from a fallen Varnak soldier. Zalnar growled and swung his blade again, but this time, Jason was ready. He blocked the strike with his sword, the clash of metal ringing out in the chamber. Jason pushed forward, using his strength to shove Zalnar back. But the Varnak leader wasn't finished. He spun around, delivering a brutal kick to Jason's chest. The force of the blow sent Jason crashing into the wall. "Captain!" Sarah shouted. Jason groaned, but he wasn't out of the fight yet. He pushed himself up, using the wall for support. The humans had to win this. Earth's future depended on it. Caleb fired another arrow, aiming for the weak spot in Zalnar's armor. The arrow struck true, and the Varnak leader let out a roar of pain. It was enough to give Jason the opening he needed. With a fierce cry, Jason charged again, slashing his sword at Zalnar's energy blade. The two weapons locked, sparks flying as the blades clashed. Jason gritted his teeth, forcing the Varnak leader back. With a final, powerful strike, Jason knocked Zalnar's weapon from his hand. Zalnar stumbled backward, and in that moment, Jason lunged forward. He brought his sword down, striking the Varnak leader in the chest. Zalnar's 6 eyes widened in shock as he crumpled to the ground, defeated. The humans stood in silence for a moment, catching their breath. The Varnak leader was dead, and the fortress was theirs. "We did it," Caleb said, his voice filled with disbelief. "We did," Jason said, his voice steady but tired. "But we're not done yet. There's still more to do." The Varnak had underestimated humanity from the start, but now they knew the truth. Humans would fight no matter the odds, and they would never back down. The smoke of battle still lingered in the air as Jason Turner and his team stood inside the now empty fortress. The walls, once strong and unyielding, now lay in ruin. The hum of the Varnak machines had fallen silent, replaced by the quiet breaths of the humans who had fought to take it all down. Zalnar, the Varnak leader, was dead, his body sprawled on the cold stone floor, his once proud form now just a shadow of the arrogance that had led to his downfall. Jason wiped the sweat from his brow and glanced around at his team. Caleb Davis was catching his breath, his longbow resting against the wall. Sarah Whitaker was already working to secure the area, her crossbow slung across her back. Each of them had fought hard to get to this point, and now that it was over, they were finally able to take a moment to breathe. "We did it," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. Jason nodded, but there was no smile on his face. "Yes, but it's not over yet. We've taken down their leader, but the Varnak are a big empire. We still have to make sure they know we're not to be taken lightly. Caleb approached, a thoughtful look on his face. You think they'll try to regroup and come back at us? Jason shook his head. I don't know, but we've shown them something they won't forget. They thought they could crush us under the weight of their technology, but they didn't count on our will to fight. The war isn't over, but we've taken a big step forward. For a moment, the team stood in silence. It wasn't the time to relax yet. They had won a victory, but they knew that this was just one battle in a much larger war. They needed to secure their position and prepare for whatever the Varnak would throw at them next. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors, and Jason turned, his hand instinctively reaching for his crossbow. But it was just their communications officer, Lieutenant Emma Harris, who had come up to join them. She was smiling, though her eyes were still filled with concern. We've received a message, Emma said, holding up a small device. It's from the Varnak Council. Jason's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected the Varnak to make contact so soon. The last thing they needed was to be surrounded by more enemies. Play it, Jason ordered, stepping forward. Emma pressed a button on the device, and a hologram of a Varnak official appeared in the middle of the room. The alien's skin was pale, and his 6 eyes glowed with a cold, calculating light. His voice was deep and filled with authority. Humans, the Varnak said, his tone harsh but respectful. You have proven yourselves capable of much more than we expected. Zalnar was a fool to underestimate you. But understand this. Your victory does not change the fact that you are outmatched. The Varnak Empire is vast, and we will not stop until we have reclaimed what is ours. Jason's eyes narrowed. The threat was clear, but the message was different from what he had expected. The Varnak weren't attacking immediately. Instead, they were calculating, trying to figure out their next move. Is that all? Jason asked, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. The Varnak official paused as though considering the human's response. There is one more thing. You are a worthy foe, human. Perhaps. It is time to speak of peace. We offer you a chance to join the Varnak Empire, to stand with us as equals. Jason felt the weight of the offer hang in the air. It was a tempting proposition. Become part of the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Share in its resources, its technology. It could bring prosperity to Earth, but at what cost? Giving in to the Varnak would mean surrendering humanity's independence, their freedom. The silence in the room was deafening as everyone waited for Jason's response. We'll never join you, Jason said firmly, his voice unwavering. We're humans. We fight for our freedom, for our future, and we won't stop fighting until Earth stands free, no matter the cost. The Varnak official's hologram flickered, and for a moment there was a flash of anger in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, calculating gaze. Very well, the official said, his voice colder than before. You may have won today, but remember this. Our empire is vast, and your victory does not change the inevitable. The Varnak will rise again. The hologram flickered out, leaving the room in silence. Jason let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The offer was tempting, but he had made the right decision. Earth was not meant to be a part of someone else's empire. Humanity would stand on its own, or not at all. Are we ready? Jason asked his team, his gaze hardening with determination. We're ready, Sarah replied, her voice firm. We won't back down. Caleb nodded. We've fought for this. We won't let them take it away. Jason turned to Emma. Make sure the ship's ready for launch. We've got work to do. The humans quickly prepared to leave the fortress. They had secured the area, taken down the Varnak's most powerful leader, and sent a message that Earth was not to be underestimated. But the war was far from over. The Varnak would not forgive them for their defiance, and the humans knew that the next wave of attacks could come at any moment. As the ship's engines roared to life, Jason stood at the helm, watching the fortress fade into the distance. Earth's future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jason felt a spark of hope. The humans had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and the Varnak would never forget it. "We'll fight," Jason said softly, almost to himself, "and we'll win, because that's what we do." The ship soared through the atmosphere, leaving the Varnak fortress behind. Jason and his team were more than just soldiers now. They were symbols of humanity's strength, courage, and resilience. They had stood against the most powerful empire in the galaxy and won, not because they had better weapons or stronger technology, but because they had something the Varnak did not: the will to fight for what was theirs. Earth would stand tall in the face of the Varnak. The galaxy had seen that humans were not to be trifled with, and as Jason looked out into the stars, he knew that the future was bright for humanity, because they had earned it.